Chapter 40, The Calm, Hanyu's POV. Hanyu woke up happy. The lack of any counterweight on the mattress told him that his master was already gone, but that hardly dampened his mood. He was in Antony's bed for the second night in a row. He considered getting rid of his cot, but thought he'd better wait a week or two before going that far. When he padded out into the other room, freshly scrubbed but still naked, he found Antony scribbling furiously on a piece of paper. "Good morning," the god said, without looking up. "You're up early." "Am I?" Hard to tell without any windows. Hanyu moved to stand behind his chair and peer over his shoulder. The writing was all in that strange looping language, and he couldn't restrain a pout at his inability to read it. "What's that?" "The short answer is that it's none of your business." Antony shot a glower up at him. "The longer answer is that it's a letter that's none of your business. Didn't they ever teach you not to read over somebody's shoulder?" "No." Antony gave him a longer look. "Of course not. They also didn't teach you to wear clothes, but I already knew that." "My clothes are in the closet," Hanyu protested. "How can I leave the bedroom in them?" "Right, fine, you win." Antony flicked a hand in a gesture that could have meant dismissal or surrender. Hanyu was distracted by the memory of holding that hand last night. It had been so chilly and so amazingly small in his own. It was hard to believe what the wonderful little hand could do. Had done. Antony had killed untold thousands of people. Hanyu didn't have any illusions about that. He had seen the blood after the battle. But still, holding his hand hadn't felt dangerous. It had just felt nice. Hanyu couldn't wait to do it again. "Is this blackmail?" Antony asked, interrupting his thoughts. "You'll stand there naked until I tell you what I'm writing?" "Yes." Hanyu was shocked with himself before the word was even out of his mouth. He fell far too easily into teasing. One day he was going to push his luck too far. Maybe he had just done exactly that, right now, right after a string of bad luck days. He opened his mouth to apologize, to say that of course he would never intentionally displease his master, of course he would joyfully obey any order his god chose to give him, but he was cut off by a huff. "Oh, don't go pale and goggle-eyed, boy. No meltdowns today, I'm begging you. 4 days in a row is too much for me. I'm not angry with you, so don't worry. Here, I'll even give in to your tyrannical demands." His master waved at the paper. "I'm writing to my sister." Hanyu's head felt a little light despite the reassurance. Maybe he was getting into the habit of meltdowns? He slumped to his knees next to the god's chair and felt Lord Antony tense, but then Hanyu leaned into his master's leg instead of moving into a full bow, and the god relaxed again. "That's all right, then." The gruff voice was accompanied by a gentle hand stroking his hair. Hanyu leaned into the touch and let it settle his still-pounding heart. He really was going to go too far one of these days. Then again, he already had when he dug through the chests, and that hadn't been the end. He would go too far, and Antony would tell him that he had gone too far, and Hanyu would apologize and obey, and his god would forgive him. He wished he could lean his head against Antony's knee, but he was too tall. He had to content himself with putting his elbows there and resting his chin on the edge of the desk. "Your sister?" he asked. "Lord Claudia?" He couldn't see Antony's face, but he guessed that the god was rolling his eyes. "No, my other sister, the mutant dragon rider. Of course, Claudia. She's the only sister I have." "I didn't know," Hanyu replied defensively. "You could have a whole force ship full of sisters." "Claudia and Theo are already more sister than I can handle most days," Antony grumbled. Hanyu jolted away from Antony's leg and twisted his neck to gawk at his master. "Lord Theodora is your sister?" No, not by birth. I just meant, well, every other way. She's been my closest friend all our lives." "Oh, good," Hanyu exhaled, slumping in relief. "Why would that have been a problem?" Hanyu felt his face heat. "Well, you said that you and she once, enjoyed each other? And I know I don't understand everything about the gods and things are different for you, but—" His rambling was cut off by a snort that dissolved into high-pitched, reluctant laughter. "Oh, no," Antony chortled. "No, it's not that different, never fear." "Wasn't it still awkward, since you think of her as a sister?" "How did they teach you all of the manners and absolutely no manners at the same time?" Antony asked with a final gasp of laughter. "Yes, it was awkward for a while, but you'd be surprised how much awkwardness can be gotten over in 1,000 years. 1,000 years. No matter how many times Hanyu tried to imagine that much life, he knew he would never really grasp it. He settled back against the god, marveling. "What are you telling Lord Claudia?" he asked after a moment. "Nothing." Antony's voice was sharp. Hanyu jerked away again and looked up, only to see that the god looked less angry than flustered. He saw Hanyu's frightened look and sighed. "Oh, all right. She asked after you, and I was writing an update." Hanyu had no intention of dissolving the way he had when he first learned that Antony talked about him with the other gods. Still, it seemed even more significant that he wrote about him to Lord Claudia, who had asked after him even though she was lord of her own ship and doubtless had 100 other more important things to think about. Not that Lord Antony seemed all that busy. That thought, at least, Hanyu managed to keep to himself. He also kept his lips closed over, I love you so much, and you must care for me a little, because you wrote about me to your sister. You wanted her to know about me." "Oh, stop twisting your face up like that." His god's fingers were stroking his hair again. "Go on and cry if you must. Though, are these good tears, or were you frightened when I snapped at you?" "Good tears," Hanyu sniffled, cuddling close to Antony's leg again. He stayed there, enjoying the contact, until a knock at the door heralded the arrival of his breakfast. Antony sighed. "Now I have to be the one to answer the door. Is there no end of the uses you get out of being naked?" Hanyu laughed as he sprung up and headed for his closet. "You ought to give it a try, my lord." When he came back, finally clothed, there was a tray on the table, and Antony was packing his letter away in a little metal box. "How do you send your letters?" Hanyu asked as he wriggled into his chair. Antony shut the drawer. "The paper is enchanted." "Oh." It was strange that magic would make for a disappointing answer, but Hanyu had been hoping for trained birds or fish or dragons or something like that. He'd already begun shoveling his breakfast into his mouth when Antony spoke again. "Claudia says hello, by the way." Hanyu almost spewed his mouthful over the table, just like he had on his first morning. He had been so frightened at the time. Now he would probably just laugh harder at Antony's outraged face. It had barely been a month, and already he was treating a god like a friend. And another lord among the gods had sent him greetings. "Really?" gasped now once he'd swallowed his mouthful. "To me?" "No, to my other offering." Hanyu's heart sank. Edgy? "Oh, for goodness sakes, of course it was you. I was being sarcastic. In fact, it was the second time I used that exact bit of sarcasm this morning, which probably means I'm being a prick today." "No more than usual," Hanyu protested, and then flushed when Antony burst out laughing again. "Oh, I didn't mean it like that." Once the god's giggles had died away, Hanyu spoke up, determined to change the subject. "May I read to Chihiro after exercise today?" he asked. Antony smiled. "That's kind of you. We'll go as soon as you've cleaned up." Hanyu had considered skipping his visit to the upper deck entirely and just going straight to Chihiro's side, but he couldn't give up his chance to check on Asao. After all, he had no idea whether his reckless intervention the other day had even worked. Had his friend been spared punishment, or had it only been delayed? He was thrilled to see Bunta at the door when the time finally came. "I'm so glad it's you! We didn't get a chance to talk at all last night," he cried, leaping to squeeze the smaller man in a hug. "Hello," Bunta replied, his voice muffled by Hanyu's shoulder. "I'll see you later," Hanyu tossed over his shoulder, and Antony raised a hand in acknowledgement before the door shut between them. "How are you?" Hanyu asked once he'd released Bunta and the two of them had started walking. "Did you hear about the trial? Lord Thaddeus's offering was sleeping with another god. Lord Thaddeus seems nice. Do you know him?" The older man glanced up at him. "I don't know Lord Thaddeus. I do know that you seem awfully happy with Lord Antony." Hanyu knew he should at least try to tamp down his smile, but he couldn't. "Oh, yes!" "Very comfortable," Bunta said, as if he hadn't spoken. "He's been good to you? He talks to you?" "All the time! Well, I do more talking than he does, but that probably doesn't surprise you." "Not in the slightest." Bunta smiled at him and shook his head. His expression was strained, but he seemed sincere when he said, "I'm glad to see you happy. I was afraid that Lord Antony would parch that sweet spirit of yours." "No!" Hanyu felt defensive, though he knew that that was silly. As if a lord of the gods needed him to defend his honor. "He's much more forgiving of my nature than he should be. I was never... At the temple, I'm happier with him than I ever knew I could be." "I'm glad to hear it." They were nearly to the upper deck now, and Hanyu caught the first whiff of fresh air as Bunta shook his head. "Surprised, but glad. It does make me wonder what the temple is like these days, though." If Antony continued in his determination to dispose the high priest because he had hurt Hanyu's feelings, the temple was about to get very interesting. Once Hanyu saw the sky, he found that the day was gray and grim. There was a stiff breeze blowing. He took in a big lungful of the briny air and enjoyed the salt and chill of it, but he thought it would never smell so sweet again as it had last night when Antony brought him up here and let him hold his hand as they looked at the stars. Bunta sighed. It'll be stormy before long. Poor Zenji. He'll have a trying afternoon. Who's Zenji? Hanyu asked. My lover. Bunta smiled warmly, and his usually weary face fanned into more fine lines than Hanyu had ever seen on it before. He's in charge of the kitchens officially, and the laundry unofficially. He used to belong to your Lord Antony as well. Oh, that wasn't a thought Hanyu cared for. Now there wasn't just stupid, perfect Edgy. There's also the terrifying specter of competent, commanding Zenji. Hanyu! Kenta's voice rang across the deck, and Hanyu was glad to detach himself from Bunta and run to join his friends. His cadre was spread over the stretch of deck where they did their stationary exercises. When had they stopped huddling in a tight cluster, he wondered. Perhaps he wasn't the only one for whom the ship had come to feel like home. Of course he wasn't the only one, because there was Kenta waving at him. Kenta, who loved his new life as much as Hanyu did. Good morning, Hanyu greeted as he jogged up to his friend. Jen was standing with Kenta, and he threw his arms around Hanyu once he joined them. Hanyu, you're walking much better today. Jen! Kenta squawked, flushing. Hanyu could only laugh at his friend's bluntness. Lord Antony gave me salve, he said, morning and night. He applied it himself. Jen hooted and Kenta blushed. How intimate. Something about Kenta's blush and startled words sent a great rush of giddy pleasure through Hanyu. It was intimate, wasn't it? If his friends thought that Antony's behavior was unusual, then it probably was. It was nice to have outside opinions. After a few more minutes of happy chatter, Hanyu caught sight of a sleek black braid and slender shoulders and broke away from Kenta and Jen with a hasty apology. Asao! He called as he came to stand behind his friend. How are you doing? Fine, Asao said, turning to look at him. His friend's smile was only a little strained. Lately, Hanyu counted that as a victory. Lord Marcus never punished you after everything? Hanyu asked, and Asao shook his head. I almost hate to tell you your scheme worked, since I'd rather not encourage you to do it again, but yes, I never heard another word about it. A little knot of tension that Hanyu hadn't even realized he was carrying around in his belly loosened. Oh, good! What about you? How was the rest of your punishment? Are you all right? Hanyu glanced around. No one was paying attention to their conversation. Lord Antony didn't finish it. He knew what I was doing. He only pretended to be angry. Asao didn't get angry this time. He just looked a little bleak. Oh. And don't worry about me doing it again, Hanyu rushed to add. Lord Antony said I couldn't. I think he'd punish me in earnest if I tried something like that again. He was very stern about it. Asao managed a half smile. Well, that's something. Very stern even, you poor thing. Asao, how to phrase this. If we asked Lord Antony, I'm sure he would tell Lord Marcus not to be so rough with you. We could... You don't need to worry about me, Hanyu, Asao interrupted. My lord's attentions may be rough, but they are an honor. If you ever get the chance to experience that kind of service, you'll understand. Oh. I want you to focus on serving your own master so that maybe someday he'll find you worthy. Mine already has, so stop pitying me, all right? There was something terribly firm and final about the way he turned his back on Hanyu.